It's the Misfits.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We are finally getting to a show that we had advertised in the summer. And we needed to take our time on it. And there's a reason why, and we'll get to why we wanted to take our time with it. But we're finally ready to do it. Captain Bluebeard is here, and we are going to jump in and deal with, in the most Misfits style way, of the topic of Project 2025, as far as what it is, why it's in the news all the time, and why it matters, I guess, is the big overall arching theme here. Why this whole thing matters and why it matters that you know what it is. So we're going to try and do this as gently as possible, but considering it's the two of us doing this, just strap yourselves in, because here we go. So let's start with this part of it. Joe, give us a brief overview as far as what Project 25 is, as for, what is it? What are we talking about here?
So it is in a nutshell, a piece of proposed changes that were set forward and very quickly associated with Trump because of the way that it was pitched, that it was Trump style politics and things like that. And before we get to the nuts and bolts, this is something, just a little PSA for all of you that are listening. This is one that is going to threaten to trigger a response, because politics have a way of doing that, and this is a hot button topic from every angle. So the 1,000 plus page document exists out in the wild. Go find it. Don't just take whatever news outlet has spun it one way or the other, because trust me, when preparing for today's episode, I found news outlets going both directions. Some heralding this as the perfect thing to help bring America back to life, and likewise that this is the end of the world. And so
this is part of why we're doing it also, is because if you haven't figured it out yet or not, when we get into the heavy politics stuff within the Misfits, we are trying to do it much more from a grace theology standpoint, not from a let's bash people over the head because they believe this about their politics. So we are still going to say, because I just put it up for those watching, if you want to go read it yourself, or want to at least attempt to read it yourself, because like you said, I've seen different reports on this too, because depending on if you get it in print or if you're reading it online, or if it's anywhere between 900 and like 1,060 pages. It's a big honking thing.
Yeah.
Heritage.org is the place to find it in its original context. So we're going to just start right off the bat by saying, if you're wanting to go look at it for yourself, it's heritage.org. That's the easiest place to find it in its original context. But in addition to that, with what he said, nothing that we're going to say on here today is any different than what we have ever said on this show before. It's just that this topic specifically, in order for us to get to the why the church cares, we have to get through the actual politics and the sociological impacts of all of it. And so it's going to trigger a response much faster
Yeah.
and a little bit more carnal than other times that we've had these same sort of conversations. So
Yeah.
keep going with it, Joe. It's 1,060 pages, something like that.
So
Keep going.
yeah, and essentially, its main pillar is this idea of a mandate for leadership. In a nutshell, what it wants to do is extend the power of the executive branch of government. That's part of why if you've heard this whole thing, and one of the things you've heard is that this is the document that's trying to make it so that way Trump becomes perma president and all of that. That's why, because it is trying to extend the power and the reach of the executive branch. And while I have had a lot to say and continue to have a lot to say about this country's system and political system and the whole nine yards, this is something that, whether you like it or not, is proposing changing the scales
Yeah.
of how everything works. And so this is put forward by the Heritage Foundation and something like 100 other smaller organizations. This is a very well-funded project. They're up to the 8-figure mark. So this is not some fly-by-night idea. This is something that's very real. And for those of you that don't know, I reckon that most of you probably do, but the Heritage Foundation is an ultra conservative think tank, essentially. It's filled with many former Trump administration politicians, supporters, different things like that. It is very clear when you hear, and we'll get more into this on into the conversation, but it is very clear that this group has chosen Trump to be their poster boy for bringing change in and saving America and all of that sort of stuff. Because if you notice, the entire platform of Trump's campaign from Jump Street, I'm not even just talking about like, let's save America. The whole thing has been MAGA, make America great again. And trying to touch on a nerve of, let's go back to a time where America was strong and moral values were in every home and all of that sort of stuff. But what the other hand behind the back that's getting ready to smack you upside the head isn't telling you is where that snapshot is from times like the 50s,
Yeah.
when hang on, when women did not have the rights that they have now, when people of various ethnicities did not have the rights, where organizational standards for the rights and access of many people were not what they are now. And this is why I make it a point. I drop a couple of those heavy hits right from the jump street to frame this in the fact that, like I said, this isn't an urban legend. This is all real. And also, these are talking points within the document.
Yeah.
This is a thing. And one of the things that is almost like some like deja vu in all of this is, I am of the vintage that I was a wholesale adult. No, not quite. But I was not particularly young when everything came into place, where basically Americans could get spied upon very, very openly. And it was all in the idea of trying to stop terrorism and stuff like that. But very quickly it came out that those things that were put in place for the good of the people turns out were being used to very different means. And so to me, I look at this and I'm like, history is repeating itself all over again.
And this is part of why we are doing this episode right here specifically within the midst of the whole mini series and everything like that, is that this, what you should see as we go through, is that this very much falls in line with what we talked about the last time Joe was here, and how people read Matthew 25, and that a lot of what drives the desire for this type of document to be in place is one of fear of what's coming, because of a perceived comfort that they thought they had at one time. And that's what the big thing with Heritage, and there's a reason that we keep coming back to Heritage Foundation, because this is the big thing. Unfortunately, when this discussion starts up now, post the last presidential election, is that some of the pushback from people that are saying, well, if nothing else, we've got to stop Project 2025. Trump has distanced himself, at least vocally, from the project. And so when people are just start saying, well, this is just Trump politics, and so that's why it must be stopped, regardless of whether it is Trump politics or not, Heritage Foundation, there's a reason they call themselves Heritage. They are trying to claim a return to American heritage with peace and prosperity and wealth, but as a peace, prosperity, and wealth that is built solely on explicit, and we're not, I mean, there's no other word for it. It is explicit white supremacy, patriarchal misogyny, in order to get what they perceive to be a heritage of peace and prosperity. And so that's what we are going to try to walk through for the next however long we're here, is what this looks like as far as what it is that it's wanting to do, why it's wanting to do it, and get through it, so that way we can look at, okay, so how should we actually respond? Because like we said, we've got to actually deal with the politics here in order for us to actually fully understand what it is that's going on. So like we said, it's like 1,000 some pages. It is not easy reading by any means, because you either are going to be sitting there banging your head against the wall of like, what is this even saying? Or you're going to get about 25 pages in and then want to throw up because of what it is. You actually understand what it is that it's saying.
Yeah.
So in order to get through it, it's going to take a while. But in general, like you said, the main pillar that is focused on is this idea of executive leadership within a government standpoint is one of the main pillars. Heritage claims there to be 4 pillars, the 4th pillar being the executive leadership. These are the other ones that they claim to be the pillars that they're looking at, just so that way we get a good idea. They say they are providing solutions. They're claiming this to be a researched document, providing solutions to today's problems. Their big one at number 2, which is just as big, if not bigger, than number 4, is mobilizing conservatives. And that's a big key word here, is that they're claiming conservatives as the heritage of America.
Yep.
And they're saying they're uniting conservatives to work together. And then the number 3 is they're training leaders to prepare future generations that will lead America. So the big one of number 4 is we have to make sure that we empower leadership. Number 3 is we train people to take over that leadership in the future. And we do that by mobilizing a conservative party. And we mobilize them by doing heavy research and thought studies and think tanks and everything else. That is the extreme watered down platform that Heritage is putting out with Project 25. Now, what we're going to get into is how number 1 and number 2 look and how that affects number 4 specifically as to what this looks like politically, because the big things are, one, they claim this to be research driven. Most of this research is stuff that is very much affected by the worldview that they are pushing forward, which we already said is built off of white supremacy. It's built off of patriarchal misogyny. And the other word we haven't thrown out yet that we're going to have to eventually, so we'll throw it out here, is a very much theonomistic outlook as well. White male Christians, white male conservative Christians, are the central driving force of the world according to this project.
So there's two concepts that, in order to understand the core of this, that you need to be able to at least understand, so that way you can understand where it is that, like, if you're just looking at this from the point of view of, I want to be able to separate fact from fiction,
Mm-hmm.
then there are two words that you need to know: theonomy and authoritarianism.
Yes.
Because both of those things, they were, depending on where in the timeline you're at, as far as what the big things were that are being used to promote this thing, you will come across different versions of all of this. Because on one hand, if you read through this, the ones that are actually supporting this will openly state that we need a strong moral leader who will keep this country flying straight and keep it great. Like a central dictator. Come on, like, and yeah, I'm not gonna hide my opinions along the way here, but I'm also trying not to just dump what I think about this, because I do know that there are some people that are genuinely curious about what this is and all of this sort of stuff. But there, so on one hand, you have folks that are just going the moralistic route of trying to put the right figurehead into place, the right leader into place, to keep America moral and upstanding and all of that. On the other hand, there, in the modern context, generally speaking, the type of people that are going to be voting Republican are conservatives. Yes, political historians can make arguments about it used to be the other way around and all this sort of stuff. We live in 2024. What used to be is no longer here. So we got to work with what we've got. So in the modern context, they are capitalizing on the fact that most people who are going to be interested in this are hyper conservative, and generally what goes hand in hand there is religion, is American Christianity. And so there's this spin to it of, this is like, without going into the ripple effects and the people portion of it, this is getting touted as, we're trying to empower the people of America. We're trying to make it so that way there's more availability for opportunity for specifically Americans. And there's this idea of things like eliminating abortion altogether, and eliminating different key things that Christians would look at and say, oh, like basically trying to silence the LGBTQ plus community and stuff like that. And these key talking points that from the Christian side of things, some Christians are looking at and saying, oh, this guy wants to bring Christian value back to America, those standards of Christianity. Now, we'll get to towards the end just exactly what flavor of Christianity this reflects. But this is getting spun as as putting this on the shoulders of a true American hero,
Yeah.
and religifying this guy as a talking head, as a figure piece. And that's why it's so important to say, okay, when you're looking at this, the guys behind the curtain, their heritage, and what we need to be aware of at a base level when it comes to this is it's not just about Trump. Believe that. Believe that. If Kamala Harris wins and we go 4-8, whatever, and there's a roundup now, like there's now a new person in position to be the figurehead for the Republican Party, this is just going to come back. This is not this is not live and die on Trump's shoulders.
And that's the big thing, is that this isn't even necessarily new. It's just newly published and newly platformed.
Yeah,
Because
something
this
as
is the
extensive
big...
as this is not like that's a good point. Something as extensive as this, something as well funded as this, there's literally no way that this is brand new.
No.
There's too much put into this for this to be a new concept. Thinking about it, I've probably heard grumblings of Project 2025 for something like 15 years.
Yeah. Because this is what historically this is what we're dealing with, is that the rallying cry within most of conservatism since FDR has been the government is too big. And so we've got to return power to the people. That is part of what one of the first things that they lay out within Project 2025 is saying, is this idea of we are going to once again return the power to the people.
Yeah.
We're going to eliminate big government and return power to the people the way that it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But the way... And this is where we'll get into a little bit of political theory here, because in some ways they are not 100% wrong in the way that they are putting out that this is how it has to happen. Because if you have 3 branches of government and you're claiming that the ones that are making and interpreting the laws, legislative and judicial, are too big and have too much reach, the way to combat that, if we're talking about a system that's supposed to be on a balance of authority and balance of checks and balances and everything else, is you have to put more weight into the one that's in the middle and that's supposed to be monitoring everything. That has to have more weight in order to balance everything out. In theory, on paper, that would be the way to do it. However, when you are talking about a heritage that is one of, we need to go backwards when government was small and it was all about the people, but not all people are represented. This is how you end up with, historically, this is how we see the rise of authoritarian governments throughout history. You rile up saying, this is the man, this is the hero of the people.
Yeah.
But what happens when the hero of the people conquers the enemy?
Yeah, there are people who we need to accept the fact when we look at world history, we need to accept the fact that there were some people who believed that Hitler was a great guy. There are some people who believe that Mussolini was a great guy. There are supporters for the various dictators that have taken power in different regions, in different areas across the world. That's just the of it. And for those of you that are listening to the podcast, what you need to do is find your way over to YouTube, because that way, for nothing else, you can see the look that I just gave listening to everything that came out of Andrew's mouth, because it's literally impossible. It's literally impossible. Like the thing that this almost touches on this idea of why going after a utopian society is toxic, because it's
Yeah.
literally impossible. Um, the fact of the matter is this: when you look at the goal of what Project 2025 is, if you take all emotionalism out of it, if you take all preference out of it, at a base level, this is trying to rearrange governmental power to try to put more power into the executive branch. Whether you agree with it, disagree with it, whatever, each one of the plethora of talking points is all designed with that specific goal in mind. And the framework for that, the road to get there, is to wind it back, to take us back in time to a time where it was things were simpler, things were smaller, things were, all of those kinds of things. Here's the reality, though. When you go back, now we need to be real clear and real honest about exactly what America looked like. Because you go back far enough, and what do you have? Okay, you go back far enough, and now I'm going to go back and then go forward. So don't worry, everybody. I promise you, I'm not skipping over a big old chunk of U.S. history in order to make a point, because trust me, everybody is getting something out of this one. You go back far enough, what'd you have? Humans owning humans. Okay, I'm not going to say it I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You had humans owning humans. Okay. Then you fast forward, you had no longer humans owning humans, but you still had a system where it was designed to other anybody who did not look or sound or think like the collective. And then on top of that, you had a society that to an extreme, to a heightened degree than today. I'm not saying it's not still present today, but like literally the systems that were in place very openly allowed for this.
Yeah.
Where women were not given power or autonomy or an ability to be able to operate as a whole human being unto themselves. We have these different systems in place where cops, realtors, politicians, hospitals, stores had every single right and were encouraged to be biased based off of skin color, ethnicity, gender. So when you look at this idea of the heritage of America, we need to get real honest. about what the heritage of America actually is, what the background of this country actually is. And if you can be um patriotic and all of this kind of jazz, whatever. I'm not the point isn't to slam on anybody who thinks about this stuff in one way or another, but regardless of how you think about politics and stuff like that, if you are trying to process through a document that is going to rearrange everything, then in order to get an authentic picture, that's all I'm asking for, is look at the authenticity of the situation. You have to be honest about where this country came from. And so you roll that clock all the way back to the 1700s. You roll it back to the dawning of America. What do you have? You have pseudo Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
You have these building blocks that are trying to infuse Christian ideals that are half baked at best and forming them into governmental structures. And that pseudo quasi Christian but not really existence is exactly where they're trying to roll the clock back, because you notice there's kind of a uniformity in what all these dudes look like that are
Yeah.
petitioning these things. It is not a surprise. Excuse me, a surprise to that's like they all look this way. They're trying to bring they're trying to bring this back. And when we look at where this country came from, it is, if in and this is the first time that I'm going to give a little bit of an opinion seasoned in on all of this. If you really want progress, why move backward? If
Yeah.
you really want progress for all people, why move backward? Even if you don't like the other side, which we need to get away from that language anyway. But even if you don't like the other side, being honest about this, what they're trying to actually do with it. And we'll get into some of the key talking points about what they're looking to reform. Because again, 1,000+ pages, we're not going to hit them all.
Yeah.
So if
We're gonna hit the
it's not
big
that
ones.
we're
Yeah.
it's not like we're neglecting some of the talking points, but we will be here for a long time trying to talk about every single one. Um, when you look at what this is trying to do at a Reader's Digest level, sure, it's trying to rebalance the scales and bring the power back to the people and all of this sort of stuff. But in all actuality, what it is trying to do is put the power back in the hands of people who look and sound a very specific way. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what happens after that?
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. I think when it's a financial investment to go to the gas station and the grocery store, oh, trust me, I'm not free from feeling the pain in my pocketbook when I go fill up my car and stuff like that. But I think some of the misconception here is that all of that lands on one person's shoulders, and
Yeah.
that this other person is going to roll the clock back to, oh, when gum was a nickel and you could fill your car up for $1.25. First off, economics and human greed would like a word. Second off, that's not what it's rolling the clock back on.
And this is the big thing: is there's misconceptions about both how our government operates and a misconception is as even what it is, as far as what the focus of American traditional politics has always been as well.
Yeah.
Because we always hear, well, America was all about freedom from tyranny and throwing off tyranny. And the way that we hear it now is it was always about power to the people.
Yeah.
But let's actually spread that out a little bit, because the reality is that just like any other place where we see abuse rise, the central founding principle that produces any kind of abusive behavior is power and control.
Yeah.
The U.S. government founded in the 1780s, and I'm saying 1780s because you got to understand, again, this is the misconception. The 1776 document is not the founding of the U.S. We were a completely different country before the 1780s. But
Yeah.
and that's just why we need to actually teach history, but that's a whole nother soapbox to get on. But this is the big thing. We talk about the idea, well, they were throwing off tyranny, throwing off oppression. The U.S. Constitution, in ink, still there today, shows that is not the case. Because in the founding documents, it states very clearly that only certain people are considered people.
Yep.
It was about centralizing power and control in the hands of the people that thought they deserved it. That was what the founding documents were for. Now, they took great care in presenting a system that kept one person from lording power and control over the other people that thought they deserved the power and control. That's why we have the checks and balances, but the checks and balances only work for those that already have the power and the control. And then as we move forward, why is it that whenever we get into it was always better at this time, or America was great back then discussion, it's always and always has been the central hinge point as to when America stopped being great always was when suddenly a certain group of people lost a little bit of power and control. The Civil War, we lost power and control. America was better pre-Civil War. Pre-suffrage, America was better before women had the right to do everything because we lost a little bit of power and control. Civil Rights Act, America was better before that because now we've lost a little bit of power and control, because now suddenly we went from 13 individual colonies that were ruled by the white man and powered by the black workforce to this country of multiple states and growing and growing and growing because of the same greed that got us in the mess in the first place. And now suddenly what the power and control that we desired and that led us to get this big, suddenly now we can't, it doesn't taste the same. And so we've got to go back to where it tasted better.
Yep. And the thing to consider when rolling the clock backward and not focusing on progress is that at any stage, literally any stage of America's background, has this country propped up off the backs of some other group of people.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
We came here, and the first to get othered were the indigenous peoples.
Mm-hmm.
You go back and watch old Western movies and all of that. Generally, you're going to hear words like savages and stuff like that to talk about people. Like, don't let that escape you. And also, I understand that movies are movies, and I understand that movies are fiction, but those movies are based off of reality. It's what made them so popular.
And they were
Is
popular, and that's the big thing. They were popular for a reason.
Yep.
If this was just some like out there idea about
Yeah.
people, they would not have been popular. That's why that's part of the, the complaint that we hear from people about, Gen Z, millennials, Gen Alpha, all these other things, is that, well, they're too sensitive because they can't take a joke. Well, it's simply that the newer generations are not quite as comfortable with hearing you dehumanize people that they are friends with.
Yep.
It wasn't a matter of it was like some Hollywood fictional thing, so we don't need to worry about it. Whether it was a Hollywood fiction or not, at some point in history, culture said it was okay to talk about people this way.
Yep.
Or it would not have gotten put out.
Exactly. And throughout history, the other has changed
Mm-hmm.
based off of what has been happening and all of that. But even to the early 2000s, where everybody talks about how united this country was and all of that sort of stuff, united against what?
Yeah.
It's like I have been very vocal that I get that language changes over the years. And one of the things that one of the areas where I really cannot stand the language choice is the over reliance on the term phobia as a means of, oh, you hate this group of people, so you're phobic of those people. No, I'm not afraid. That words mean things. Words really do mean things. But one of the ways where I saw a phobia, like a legit phobia, develop was Islamophobia post 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a time where anybody and everybody who looked a certain way was viewed as a potential terrorist and somebody that you should be fearful of. Just like at one point in time, anybody who was Japanese was viewed as somebody
Yeah.
that you should be fearful of. Anybody who was black, anybody who was you can take your pick. It's a rotating door. But the when we look at the full timeline of history, if what we're trying to accomplish, and that matters because there are some people who very openly support this, who would rather see a world where certain groups of people were held down. But if the goal is to have, a country where everybody and anybody can have a voice, this isn't how you get there.
Yeah.
That's not you again are going back. It goes back to the well of, in order to strengthen the country, it has to be built off the backs of certain people.
And that's where well, before we actually dive into how this looks in terms of the practices that they're wanting to implement.
Yeah.
The reason that phobia is the word that is attached, phobe is attached to these different things is actually an important piece to all of this. Because the idea of a phobia is it's not just a fear, it's an anxiety producing fear.
Yeah.
It's one that causes an actual physical reaction. It's not just I'm scared, it's I'm scared and I can feel the fear.
Yeah.
And so the reason that it is considered to be like Islamophobic xenophobic, all these homophobic, is because of the fact that it is typically not a natural fear. And that's something that I'm gonna parse out because even Joe's looking confused.
I'm not looking confused. I just
Natural, right? A
we're two mental
natural
health.
fear. A natural fear would be something that you just naturally are afraid of. Kids are naturally afraid of storms, right? They're loud. They flash. It's dark. It's a little creepy. But we don't typically naturally just fear other people. You can see this in interactions with kids typically. This is part of why they talk about hate is a taught behavior. We naturally, typically, if we see another human as a child, we see another human. Typically, we just see somebody that we can play with is really what it is. But that's not a natural fear. It's not going to produce an anxiety. But when you are repeatedly told that you need to fear something, and typically it's you need to fear because they are either going to harm you physically or harm you emotionally or harm you financially, are the big ones.
Yeah.
Then suddenly, oh, this person is always out to get me. They want what I have. And so I have to protect what I have. And now we're back to the power and control of they want what I have. And so I must maintain it. And so we now suddenly have this anxiety around it that is manufactured by the people that actually have the power and control. And that's important as we get into what Project 2025's actual goals are, because it helps us understand really at the heart of it what it is that they're actually trying to produce. Because some people will read through the document, not read it very carefully. They're just going to read through for the talking points that they're hearing about, which is fine. That's research. That's looking it up, which is much better than what some people do. But if you just read it without some of the background, as far as who heritage is or how some of these things interconnect or what American history looks like, you can read it and it's like, well, this is just them proposing a political theory or an economic theory or whatever. It's not necessarily hate driven. It's not necessarily fear driven. But when we actually get down to why these policies specifically are being chosen, we're going to see very clearly it is about othering others to maintain a sense of health, prosperity, power.
So this is where I think it's I think it's beneficial. I wasn't sure if this part of the conversation was going to happen or not, but I think this is the part where we need to put our hats on. Now, mind you, I don't know. I don't know. I've been working with Andrew for years at this point, so we all may learn something about Andrew right now. I don't know. Anybody who has gone through pastoral training has gone through some element of mental health training, generally.
Well, anybody that has done it well has gone through mental health training. Let's clarify. Anybody that has gone through good pastoral training.
I think that there's a difference between pastoral training and just going and getting certified. Those are not the same thing.
That's what we're referring to as good training, is real training.
Well, just training in general. Like I'm because I've seen some of the worst training out there, but it still touches on some aspects of mental health terribly, but it still touches on it. So I'm saying that in the pastoral background, there is some element of mental health. That being said, after I got ordained and became a pastor, I realized very quickly what needed to happen was non-Christian psychology training, counseling training needed to come as well. And
Yes.
so I am certified as a mental health professional. And why I made the crack about Andrew is obviously I tee it up with the pastoral piece because we're both pastors, but that additional piece of the mental health first aid certification, that training of it is what I'm bringing to this conversation and what I'm about to say. Okay. I think you can get to everything that you said without muddying the waters of using terms that ultimately you need to squint and cock your head to set into place. I think there are aspects of it that make sense, but I don't think we need to complicate it because so much of this is not complicated. And
Right.
where this thing thrives is living in the shadows of complication. And that's why I buck back against utilizing certain phrases and words that you don't need to because they have a cultural cachet that just stimulate fire, that just stimulates reaction, it just stimulates emotion. It's nothing more. You can talk about the othering piece without talking about, oh, if you do this then you are phobic, because all you're going to do is create more division and separation. Now I'm not saying that's what you did, but I'm saying
Right.
that I would counsel anybody that's reading through this thing but and listening to what Andrew just said, focus in on the othering piece. Don't get caught up on the language model. Don't get caught up on the specifics of, oh, so you're saying if I vote this way, then I'm automatically transphobic and homophobic and this phobic and that phobic and pick your no. But ask the question, who needs to get othered? Or who can get othered
And that's
out
the big one.
of this whole thing? Because again, we need to look at the lens of history. People have done this, this dance card, friends. Part of the reason why so many of my brothers and sisters who are millennials, especially zennials, like this gets even worse as you get into that middle ground where I
Yeah.
sit, because I'm technically a zennial, where we're we've been accused of being a little, oh, I don't know, nihilistic. And we've been accused of being obsessed with nostalgia because 99 was basically the last year where the world wasn't gonna end. 2000 Y2K, that was a real thing. We make jokes about it now, but that was a real thing. 2001, the whole world changed. So many things changed. And then you had the Mayan calendar, and then you
Yeah.
had this political thing, and you had a recession, and you know what I mean? There was always something that was coming to destroy the fabric
Yeah.
of everything.
I want to point out that it's absolutely hilarious that you talk about the fact that you get accused of being nostalgic, and then look at your wall behind you right now.
I'm
I'm
just
just
talking
pointing
about
that out there. I'm just
I'm just
pointing it
talking about
out.
your
I'm just
wall.
pointing it out. Now, the yeah. Anyway, the but what part of the reason that I brought all that up though is because of the fact that I think it will, as we get through some of the things, because let's just actually go in. There was one piece that you said there as far as it's not just even about who is being othered, it's about who could potentially be
Can
othered.
be. Yes. Yes.
Is a big piece actually of the Project 2025 puzzle.
Yeah. So
Anybody that was back with us in season 1, and actually this is where we actually caught the attention of a lot of people, should remember when we had Antoine Malone on and we were walking through what CRT actually is and was and all this other stuff. Part of the reason why, and this is part of the other reason why we're saying that Project 2025 is not new, it's just newly platformed and newly published.
yeah.
The CRT scare and now it's been relabeled with DEI scare, is all coming out of part of what he just talked about in terms of are we even willing to look at who potentially could be othered from this situation?
Right.
CRT was designed to look at policy decisions that were about to be made and look at the impact of what is going to happen.
Yeah.
By looking at past policies and the impact. DEI is not doing that. DEI is supposed to be a response to prevent policies from being placed or being removed. One of the major tenets within Project 2025 is a removal of environmental impact studies. And that's not just environment meaning ecology, it's sociological environmental impacts and a lot of these other things, with the accusation that those studies themselves are actually the real racism going on. This is a big deal because it's not just about who is being othered. Now, it completely realistically eliminates anybody from being able to take Project 2025 and say, look at the problems we have here. Because a lot of this is Project 2025 is a mandate, but it is something that at the moment is only can be classified as a political theory. It has not been enacted, and it cannot even be enacted yet because of who is in control right now. So everything that we are doing from analysis, that anybody that has done analysis, all of it is taking the theory that is on paper and applying it to the world and seeing what patterns are going to come out. One of the main things that this presents is wanting to prevent that sort of thing from happening.
Mm-hmm.
It goes beyond that, because once you no longer can look at what policy decisions are doing to other people and no longer really caring what the policy decisions are going to be doing to other people, then we get into some of the ones that are talked about a little bit more and that we're going to spend a little bit of time dealing with. So, Joe, which is the big one that you hear most of the time?
Oh, that's impossible to boil down to a single one. But let's start off with, it opens the door for a discrepancy based off of race for everything from housing to education. It wants to propose that the president should remove a really big piece that gets used to enforce civil rights protections.
Yeah.
By basically taking out the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And basically the idea here is this will try to keep this is getting spun as a means to be able to level the playing field and make housing available for everybody. However, without those key things in place, then suddenly there's nothing in place to stop somebody from judging based off of skin color or ethnicity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this is part of where it's a lot of these things overlap. And this is part of what we said before, as far as why, if you're just looking it up on a tenant by tenant basis, you may miss some of how these things overlap and interconnect.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the argument, and even though Trump has distanced himself, J.D. Vance has not. Make that clear. because I just heard an interview with him recently again where he will repeatedly claim that things like the two that Joe just mentioned, as far as the Fair Housing Act, the Civil Rights Act, actually have done more racial damage to the country than there was before those acts existed. Because the idea that we're going to prioritize marginalized people over non-marginalized people in terms of housing is unfair. And this again is part of why I worded it the way I did at the beginning. As far as on paper, it does seem to make sense. If you are prioritizing one over the other, then it seems like there's an unfair weight scale. And this is part of why I don't think we actually did. I forgot. We skipped over this on my little outline I had for myself. I didn't send it to you because I was going to surprise you with it. One thing we didn't actually do is that one thing that needs to be clarified when you have this discussion is there's a difference between equality, which is what Project 2025 is claiming they're pushing, and equity, which is much more of what the civil rights movements and things throughout American history, actually world history in general, but American history has, and I'll be accused of being the nostalgic one here. American history has done a little bit of a better job from a world history perspective on equity over equality, but not by a lot. We didn't go and behead the aristocrat leaders in order of equality. Just saying.
We just savagely killed and owned people and
right. I'm saying in terms of I'm saying in terms of like the Civil Rights Act was a peaceful protest as opposed to the French Revolution. Right? I mean, we can say that. But regardless, equity.
I'm saying it's better to stab somebody than to shoot somebody. Come on.
Equity is putting everyone at the same level.
Yeah.
Which does not mean equal, because in order for somebody, even we'll make this as non-economic and non-racial as possible. We'll just go with height for a moment. My wife is only 4'9". I'm 6 foot. In order for us to be seen at eye level, she has to be up on a platform. That would be equity. We are now seen at the same level. We are now the same height, but it's taking a little bit more effort on her part to get up to that level. And that is what is ignored by a lot of these policies within Project 2025 that is just saying, well, we want equality, which means everybody has to be looked at the same, is it misses some of these big pieces. The Fair Housing Act was initiated for the idea that everybody should be able to be housed.
Yeah.
It was a policy of equity, not of equality. The Civil Rights Act was actually a equality act in its basic thing of everyone should get the right to have their voice heard. They're different. But when you pull equity out of the conversation, suddenly one of these things looks like it's just reverse racism, and the other one is a better example of it, but we have to get rid of it in order to get rid of the other one. And so now we're just going back to the way things were before there was any talks of any of it. And now we're back to what we said before as far as what they're trying to conserve is this idea of what they thought was there in the past.
I'm real curious about something hanging out in this part of town. I come onto this show and I talk about these things, and I talk about these things from the point of view of somebody who is never indoctrinated with the Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew and I have had this conversation where there was a time where he drank the Kool-Aid. I've never been exposed to the Kool-Aid. And so I hear some of this stuff that gets said, and some of the benefit of the doubt that hangs out underneath the surface of policies of America, of different aspects of all of this, that I am genuinely curious how many of you listening can say the same thing honestly, of having never been exposed to the Kool-Aid, and so immediately, and I'm talking like knee-jerk reaction, understand the hot mess garbage that so much of this centers around, that so much of this is precipitated on, that now sitting here in 2024, we would agree with that it's hot mess garbage. But again, poison's a heck of a thing,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes poison leaves scars, and it does certain things to your psyche and to your mentality and things like that. And so I look at something like this, and I hear you talk about this, and I hear other people that are reformed from the mindset of nationalism or of a certain picture of Christianity or things like that. And there are definite differences. Generally, people like me are labeled as more hardcore about this. Um, but I would be curious to hear what a sampling size looks like from the audience, of how many people are staunch one side, consider themselves reformed on the matter, or people who have never really seen this country as a beacon or as something good, or these policies as something good or something like that, that it's just simply a matter of several band-aids that are addressing the gaping wound of how this country was founded in the first place,
Right.
what this country was founded on in the first place.
And
Because there are certain things about this that you can go and say, oh, okay, on paper, oh, okay, this, oh, okay, that. But the reality is, in when given zero parameters, when that volume knob is all the way down to zero, what does that allow, and how will people react? We know what that is. May I go back to a previous point that I said? Humans owning humans.
mm-hmm. And this is where, the first thing with that, and make sure that it's clear, is that just like any time we deal with bad theology,
Mhm.
the benefit of the doubt is given to those that are trying to figure out what's going on. The benefit of the doubt is not with the people that wrote it in the first place. We know full well what the Heritage Foundation's intentions are. But like you said, the poison is a hard thing to get over. And so we leave a little bit of room for grace for the victims of bad theology and bad thinking here. However, it doesn't allow for or excuse this other stuff that we've been talking about. And that's the bigger piece as to why this matters, in terms of, again, this is why we said it from the beginning. Don't even just take our word for it. Go look it up yourself,
Yeah.
but look it up in an actual context of what they are saying.
Yeah.
Not just what you think the policy might look like.
Right.
Because the reality is, like we said, even when this stuff looks good on paper, Joe just put it in the full context of what it is that Project 25 actually wants, of where we are going to centralize the authority to do these things into one person, and then take all of the walls down that are supposed to be holding him in check. What's going to happen? Who is going to end up being harmed by these sort of things.
Yeah.
Which is why I think one of the bigger ones that doesn't get talked about is this idea of removing the kind of impact studies.
Yep.
Because when we remove that, we suddenly are able to stick our heads back in the sand like the country did from, basically the beginning all the way till now, and ignore the suffering of those people that are around us.
So continuing on with the same motif, because this is all this is heading someplace, and these are the three, and then we'll hit some
The
rapid
big
fire
one, yeah.
ones. The next one that is a big part of this is changing the dynamics of how population counts are considered for different areas. So, Project 2025 wants to reverse a long-standing body of work from civil rights activists that have encouraged the government to basically collect more sophisticated data about different racial or ethnic groups, which historically has helped ensure communities that have been historically under resourced because of their demographics and all of that. And so basically on again, to start with the on paper, the idea here is that, again, like the last point that I brought up, is that it's evening the playing field. But the issue is it regresses how different areas are viewed, and how different areas are treated by the government. And when you look at lower income areas, lower resource areas, or multi-ethnic areas, or different things like that, they're at a state level, those tend to be the areas where there needs to be a lot more work done in order to get resources for individuals. And if you eliminate the safeguard that's in place, or the need for sophisticated data, and you look at everything as universal, then you are judging different areas by a certain standard, and thus have opened up the door for a diminishing aspect, or a diminishing access to things like Medicaid, Head Start, other governmental programs to be put into place, because these things are based off of demographics and population count.
Yeah.
And so if you regress that, that's not that there's a reason why these things got put into place in the first place, because they were being misused. And so it's not a matter of theorizing. That's part of where I think some of the differences are going to lie between even just the two of us listening to this, that there's going to be a sharpness to my words here that isn't necessarily present with Andrew. Not to say he doesn't care about these things. That's not my point. My point is, I am doubling down on the fact that we don't need to theorize. We have seen how all of this plays out. We have seen this moment in history. And so with something like this, it opens the door. It's not just about what this does for the next 4 years.
Right.
This is about what happens after that. What
Yeah.
happens in the long term with something like trying to say that every single area is exactly the same. And I want to ask, I just want to prompt the question in folks' minds that if you hear these last 2 points and you're like, yeah, that does sound like equality. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been into a situation where you've needed to be mindful of your tone or mindful of your actions because you fundamentally understand that if you act out, then you are giving every justifiable reason in the court
Mhm.
of public opinion to the authority figure to drop the hammer? Have you ever been in a position where based solely off of how you look, you are being judged and determined? If you haven't, then I really fundamentally encourage you to talk to somebody who has and get that other perspective. Because if you are, and this is speaking to the people, because if you don't, if this isn't, if authenticity on this topic is not an important piece for you, then you likely have already tuned us out.
Yeah.
But if it is, but if it is, then allow yourself the opportunity to be able to engage enough in the conversation to see where other people are coming from.
Yeah. And it's, this is part of, again, why we started off with who it is that presented this,
Yeah.
because they make it very clear from the beginning it's not just about the next 4 years, because this is what this is number 2 on their four tenet scale, is as far as what Heritage Foundation is it's the idea of mobilizing conservatives, uniting them together to work, and then immediately going into training leaders
Yep.
to prepare for future leading.
Yep.
And it's and this is also part of why we were making it clear also, is that it really does not matter which candidates are claiming to be for or against it. The candidates are nothing more than a marketing ploy
Yep.
in all reality.
Yep.
It's what's in this project that we need to actually be examining and critiquing and calling out, regardless of who is endorsing it. Now, who is endorsing it is a good tell of who we should or shouldn't be voting for, but
Yeah.
the issue is what is written in the document, not the names that are being attached to it.
Yeah. The and that matters. Because I think the misstep here, even for people who kind of see the forest through the trees, is to put this solely on the shoulders of Trump.
Right.
That this is Trump's thing. And I don't that leaves so much room on the table for this to be just an opportunity for somebody else to enact these things in another 4 years.
Let me jump on my soapbox for a minute,
Yeah, go for it.
because this is exactly the thing that I've been dealing with since Trump announced his candidacy in 2015. Is that whenever you start to criticize the platform,
Mhm.
everybody's like, well, you just hate Trump. But the reality is that the stuff that I was saying, this is why we should be distancing ourselves, especially as believers, distancing ourselves from a Trump-backed candidacy is because of the document that we've been talking about this whole time.
Mhm.
Is that this is a playbook that we have seen throughout history. It has nothing to do with the cult of personality that's leading it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The reason why I was able to say in 2016 that Trump was never going to give up power peacefully had nothing to do with Trump the man and everything to do with the words that he was speaking, the manner he was speaking them, and the backing of authority as far as who was giving him the power to say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, at the heart of it, is what, again, we are back to dealing with here. This is part of the, the other thing that we haven't addressed with it that we need to just make plain as well is that Project 2025 is backed by Christian nationalism and produces a lot of things Christian nationalism does, but it is not solely a Christian nationalist document.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely
It is not a Christian nationalist document, which is also how it's being painted. This goes beyond just the Christian nationalism stuff.
Yeah, no.
This is a political piece.
And that's why and that's exactly why I started off with the talking points that I did. Next, the third one that I have in the hat trick does tickle the minds of Christian nationalists more and goes more there directly. But there's a reason why I went with the first two that I did, because we need to get out of the framework. Like, yes, don't get me wrong. This is where I'm gonna catch some heat, and that's okay. I'm good. I'm good with it. I got big shoulders. It's fine. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
When they're marketing to you. If you are a conservative Christian that believes in good Christian values and all of that, and you think that this is a group of people that is catering to you directly and wants to bring your value system, they know exactly what they're doing. They have people in place that are beyond genius level marketers that are there specifically to rally you, to embolden you, to rile you up, and to get your vote. There is no two ways about that. They understand that conservative Christians and the Republican Party in this country, there's a reason why there's an association between those two. But I'm going to be flatly honest with you. If you think for a second that they care about you, care about your family, care about your stance, care about you as an individual, and wouldn't just step off your back if you ended up in the right category to be othered, then I'm sorry, friends. You are mistaken. You have misstepped somewhere along the way. But it's not a mistake. That is a part of the conversation, because if you are somebody who is given to Christian nationalism and you are somebody who is white, then all of these things have a much higher likelihood of sounding like no real big deal.
Mm-hmm. Or big deal in the sense of finally, I mean, I saw this this week from somebody where it's like, God is finally going to bring us back.
Yeah.
Project 25 is God's tool to bring us back.
Yeah.
And the only question, and this is part of why, because we're running out of time here, this is part of why we are, even though it was also just because we wanted to give ourselves time to make sure we got through the 1,060-page document, why we're doing it now instead of back in the summer, is that this is exactly why we are fitting it into the Matthew 25 series.
Yeah.
Is that the claim that this is going to bring us back and that this is what God wants us to do is completely ignoring what God has actually told us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. before can I stop
Yeah.
I stop you there, because
Yeah.
I do want to hit before we bring it into the theological conversation. I do want to bring up my
Yeah.
third point
Go
that
for it.
this addresses, because this is a call specifically to Christians, specifically to people who claim that they vote based off of Christian ideals. A big thing that this opens the door for is an undermining of gender equality across the government. It would eliminate the White House Gender Policy Council, which is key to promoting contraception access,
Mm-hmm.
gender-based violence prevention, and women's health equity. Now, a big part of where this topic of conversation and this part of the conversation lives and dies is abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about it. When was it last year, the year before? I don't know. The last 4 years have been like dog years. It's been insane. But when the big court case about abortion and all of this stuff hit the news, I watched as a group of Christians celebrated this big righteous moral victory, and other people were terrified. And I'll be the first one to admit, at that moment in time, I hadn't necessarily gotten, why are people so terrified of what just happened? I didn't go the route of big moral blah 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 blah, because I am so not a person who intermingles faith and government. But in talking to folks that were afraid and looking at things that have happened, where this is not theory, we have watched this play out. If you 100% straight across the board criminalize abortion, then you have to have the awkward conversation. Yes, before you even get to the word rape, you've got to talk about miscarriages.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the event of a miscarriage, I'm going to get like sensitive ears. This is a triggering thing. Then skip forward 30 seconds to a minute, whatever. But for those of you that don't know, there are forms of miscarriages that there is a body. And there, by the letter of the law, the removal of said body, even if it's not a fully formed body, the removal is criminal and does count as a form of abortion. And understand something. People have been arrested and tried and convicted of this. This is reality. This isn't some future state sort of hypothesis of how this could end. So again, we look at the whole idea as Christians. We have our opinions about what is proper what does proper sexual relationships look like? What does proper marriage look like? What does proper relationship? All of this stuff. Okay, whatever that looks like is its own conversation. But we have to work within the paradigm that we are given.
And we've
And
got to
just
see
like
the
with
we've got to see the people within
yeah,
all of that.
yeah, and so yeah, there's is there a world where it has become a very easily readily available thing that allows for actions to not have a response? And is there a misuse of some of these things? Sure. I can buy that for $1. But at the same token, to universally take that away and take that off the table and to criminalize it is not a moral victory. It is a moral victory. It is not a reflection of God's character, because it puts other people in danger. And I draw that distinction because anybody and everybody, if you have breath, if you have sentience, you have access to morality. Morality is not inherently Christian.
Right. And this is the big thing, and this is again why we're doing this now, is that the quote unquote moral answer
Mhm.
is not the message that we see coming from Jesus in Matthew 5, Matthew 6, Matthew 7, Matthew 25, Luke 4, Luke 6. The list goes on, but those are the big ones.
Yeah.
Because the moral answer with all of it is that, well, if we have to, and again, this is why the equality equity thing actually does matter, because the moral outside of a Christian understanding, morality cannot always equal equality.
Yeah.
It can't. In this situation, you have to value one life over the other. That's the only way to get to it.
Yep.
And it doesn't allow for it. That's why that's why ethics is such a complicated philosophical thing. The trolley problem is a problem because no matter what you do,
Yeah.
there's a life at stake. Harm is going to happen. That's part of morality from a human standpoint. But the gospel goes so far beyond that.
Yeah.
To where if a life has to be at stake, the called Christians say that it's my life that is going to be at stake here. It is my reputation that is going to be at stake here. It is not anybody, no harm to anyone but myself.
Yeah.
Because that is what God does for us.
Yeah.
And that is what gets missed pretty much any time we have a discussion about the morality of politics or American politics from a Christian setting.
Yeah.
Project 2025 as a written political piece just has to be dealt with from a political piece, which we already dealt with that part of it.
Yeah.
Doing these things have consequences.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. They have consequences. And so if you're going to support Project 2025 from a political standpoint, then you need to own up to the consequences that you also are supporting.
Yep.
Plain and simple.
I have more respect for a person who reads it, acknowledges it, still backs it, than the person who just is toting a party line.
Right. And that's the big, and then, you know, and then but if you want to try to claim that this is a religious document, a theological document, then you need to accept the theological consequences of this as well. Because just in the ones that we laid out, Matthew 25, which response is Jesus going to be giving you? Because like Joe said, if Project 2025 is enacted, homelessness is a direct result for some people.
Yeah.
Hunger is a direct result for some people, mostly kids, unfortunately. And we're just going to lay that straight out. Mostly kids, because one of the biggest things within the education piece is that it takes school lunches off the table.
Yep.
Thirst is going to be an issue because when you remove environmental impact studies, suddenly Flint, Michigan becomes a lot larger of a concept. East Palestine here in Ohio becomes a much bigger issue.
Yep.
And so now we have hungry, thirsty, and the topic we're going to get into more next week when we actually have the prison discussion. Death penalty becomes a much bigger thing in the Project 2025 document. That's one we didn't have time for today. But the amount of things that you can be executed for go way up within this document, while they
So-
try to proclaim this to be a pro-life document.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think from a theological standpoint, I think anybody who is even willing to consider this has already considered the theological implications. If you have gotten an hour and a half into listening to us,
Yeah.
you probably have already considered this. So all I'm going to say is this. When you look at a document like this, you need to ask yourself a question. What happens if I find myself in one of these categories?
Mm-hmm.
What happens if demographics change and the area that you live in becomes underserved? What happens if your family endures one of the deepest tragedies that can happen to a human being, and you're forced to make a horrific decision? What happens if a member of your family no longer has the same opportunities that they would have once had based off of gender?
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you become the other? Because we talk about love thy neighbor from the standpoint of the person doing the loving. What happens when you become the neighbor?
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the words of Jesus and we look at the heart of Jesus, it so blends the worlds of academia and just pure heart. Because if you read the full picture of the scriptures, it's designed in a way that, yes, it is helpful to do the word study. It is helpful to have a context and all of that, but there is a continuous narrative that is constantly pushing forward that if you that you have to work to ignore if you don't come to the conclusion of love everybody. You have to ignore pieces
Mm-hmm.
of it in order to miss that. But likewise, the academic side of really studying your scriptures and doing the word study and doing the legwork, it's not for two dudes to sit here and say, this is this and this is that. Read your Bible,
Mm-hmm.
pull out a Strong's, read the full thing, not just the area and not just in the way that some pastor or some political figure or somebody tells you how to read it. Read it for what it is and be willing to read it for what it is. And suddenly, if you are doing so with a posture of submission to being counseled and being directed and being formed, you will not be able to ignore the fact that this is progress for some off the backs of others, and
Mm-hmm.
that is exactly where Matthew 5-7 would like a word.
Mm-hmm. And this is where we get to the stereotypical traditional thing of where when Joe and I are together, this phrase comes up, is that if you have never read the gospel and come to that conclusion, rest in the story for a little bit. Because you cannot read the stories of the gospels. You can't even read the stories of the Old Testament or read the stories in Acts and not come to the conclusion that God loves his image bearers. That is the main designation for everyone. and that we are all called to do the same thing. It becomes extremely clear the moment that this stops once the story stops being a political think tank and starts becoming again the story of how God has redeemed his creation, you can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah.
It becomes a point where it has to be willful ignorance in order to do it.
Yep.
So, with that in mind, let us know what you think, because this was one that we know is going to, unfortunately, just algorithm-wise, draw in people that normally have no idea what's going on with Misfits. So, let us know what you think. In the meantime, though, a couple of housekeeping things we need to do. In light of what we were just talking about, those that have no idea what's going on and in harm of others, there is a up and coming show that is going to try to encroach on our name. That is being led by two disgraced, is the only word to use, pastors that have both been credibly not convicted. I don't think they've been convicted, but credibly ousted for sexual abuse and spiritual abuse, that are starting a show to make fun of the people that they have othered. We're going to keep it in today's terms. The people that they have othered. So the best way to combat that is to go and get ready for that by going on to Apple Podcasts and subscribing and leaving a review to the Misfit show, so that way we are all ready for when this other show that wants to try and encroach on the Misfits brand actually launch. We're already up and ready to go. You can also go to the website and get links for other stuff if you are not an Apple person, even though by now you should be an Apple person, I'm just saying. In addition, though, we announced this last week with Tiara, but now Joe is here, and so we're going to let Joe talk about it a little bit, because the thing that we also have been announcing for almost a full year, as far as that it was coming, is now finally been named, and it is slowly getting pieced together publicly. So, Joe, share a little bit about what's going on network-wise here.
So, I don't know, about a year ago, maybe more, thought up this idea of a group of people doing ministry together that creates a spot where you can find solid Christocentric teaching from a variety of different perspectives, spanning a variety of different topics, and thus KFM Broadcasting was born. So for those of you that are familiar with shows like Kingdom on the Road, Let It Rip, Buddy Walk with Jesus is a part of it.
All of your 7 shows are a part of it.
Yeah. We have come together with this idea of in all things that we do, specifically ministry related, or if it's entertainment related or something else, that we carry forward this kingdom first mindset into all of them, and that is our orientation. And so we have announced that it has been branded Kingdom First Media Broadcasting, and as time goes on, we will have a website, we will have a central hub, so that way you can find all of the work, both in front of the mic, but also written and all of that from all of our panel of participants.
Yeah. So in the meantime, until we get all of that up, those that are on Twitter can already go follow the Twitter account. It's at KFM Broadcasting. Instagram, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, all that should be up here soon. The website is slowly being put together as we're getting pieces sent to me. So all that's coming up. But in the meantime, if you are wanting to stay up to date with any of the stuff that's going on Buddy Walk wise, you can do that at buddywalkwithjesus.com. Or you can go, and if you go to the Misfits website under guests, you can find all of the different network partners and keep up with their shows and their research and their articles as well. So in the meantime, go look this stuff up for yourselves. Study it.
Real quick. I want to piggyback off of your show last week. If you are watching this and you want an educated female perspective on the application of a lot of these different concepts that we're talking about in these big theories and things like that. Last week, Tiara Wilson was on. She's a part of the network. If you've seen, if you've seen Kingdom on the Road, if you've seen Let It Rip, and you're familiar with Anthony Wilson, she's his daughter. She brings about a well-rounded perspective founded in actual fact, actual study, things like that, not just public opinion. She also came on to Let It Rip over the summer for a series of episodes talking about different versions of social justice, different social justice topics, things like that. And so if you are sick and tired of listening to two dudes kick this can around and all of that sort of jazz, and you want that other perspective, you can find the entire backlog of Let It Rip episodes. If you go to YouTube and look up Kingdom on the Road, we will be going through and establishing the new channel and getting past streams all linked up and all of the heavy lifting and all of that jazz. But for now, you can go over to Kingdom on the Road. If you look it up and go to the live tab, you'll see that all of the past versions of or past issues of Let It Rip are all up there. So go ahead and check that out.
Yeah, and you also, if you go in, she also was over on Buddy Walk talking social justice as well last summer. And so I think it was during the Esther series. So if you go back to the Buddy Walk archives into the For Such a Time as This, you'll be able to find her talking about it there as well. And there will be much more to come from her, both written and vocal, and we'll be able to catalog them a lot better here soon. But in the meantime, if you go searching through the Misfits and the Kingdom on the Road and the Buddy Walk episodes, you'll be able to find her in a few places. I think she's also been on Love Thy Neighbor a few times as well. So go find more from her. Go do your own research on Project 2025 and what's going on there. And then the big one is to just go and rest in the story for a while as you walk through the scriptures, or as you buddy walk through the scriptures. We'll see you next week.
The Ministry Misfits podcast is a production of Ministry Misfit Media in association with Overwhelming Victory. Dr. Greg Linville and Andrew Fouts are our executive producers, and Brandon Simmons is associate producer. The Ministry Misfits theme song is written and produced by J.D. Laird and Laird Creative Agency. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at ministrymisfitmedia@gmail.com or by following @ministrymisfit on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also visit our website at www.ministrymisfits.com or through bio.link/Ministry Misfits. If you would like to support Ministry Misfits, you can become a patron by going to patreon.com/Ministry Misfits.